The Assembly has resumed its sitting. When we took the suspension, the Leader of the Opposition was speaking. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me make this as short as possible. When we took the break, I was going to start on farming, and I was saying that I had recently had a brief discussion with yourself and the Premier on the matter, albeit too short for us to come to any conclusion, but I think we all three of us agreed that the time has come for us to look seriously at some kind of system incentives for the farming community wherein we can be guaranteed that we are a little more secured in locally grown produce, because the demands have gone up on it, and the farmers that we have are or has always been going along at the same pace, and the demand has gone up, and it's maybe now time to assist farmers. And in particular now, when we had this pandemic and there were so many concerns about the lack of food, we were all trying to ensure that food supply was secured for this country during that period. Now more than ever we need to do that. And I do know that at the time of our discussion, you spoke about that, and which I agreed with, that provision that we had years ago put into the immigration law for caregivers, that farm helpers should have some kind of provision such as that, where they can spend longer than 9 years if they so choose. It's an essential industry, if I may, and I think we need to promote it much more. One of the things, having traveled so extensively in the East Caribbean, that I witnessed during my many trips there, was how they promoted local farming and for their people to eat locally, with billboards and the like. That's the kind of stuff we need to encourage in this country. And Mr. Speaker, I must tell you that I'm a convert. When years ago I didn't think that we could be self-sustaining in farming, because I didn't see the arable lands available like other countries have, where you see acreage, hundreds of acres. But I am convinced with the little small farms and the backyard farming that this country can do much better than it is doing. I know I spoke to Mr. Paul Budden the other day, and chickens, he was telling me he was doing 8 dozen eggs a day and could not supply the demand. That's a lot of eggs. I mean, he is raising some 150 cattle right there around his house, and I was shocked. I don't know if you'll, at least he has made a go at it, but then Paul Bodden was from knee-high in it too, so he has understood it all these years. So he's one of the premier farmers in this country, with doing his own in AI and artificial insemination and the likes. I don't know how many more can reach that, but I believe there are young farmers here with the potential if we support them. We need to, though. We really need to. And I said to the Premier, it may come to that point now where we need to, I don't know, I just threw out a number, $5-10 million a year we put aside for grants. I saw some of the farmers in East End who, during this pandemic, who were trying to sell off some of their livestock, their goats and the legs, because of so many other financial obligations that they had. And I don't think I know the Premier said there was $1 million provided for supplies and the legs. And feed for livestock, I guess, but I don't even know if they knew that. Wide enough, I mean. So somehow I know the minister who has responsibilities is somewhat of a backyard farmer as well. And I'm sure she quite well understands where I'm coming from. And so does the Premier and your good self, Mr. Speaker, and myself, but I only do it as a hobby, to tell you the truth. Those are the areas that we need to look into. And Mr. Speaker, let me say, and to the Minister for Finance and the Financial Secretary, where is he? Many years ago, when we developed Cayman Islands Development Bank, I put emphasis on development. It was modeled after Caribbean Development Bank, to some extent, for the purposes of the development of the people of these Cayman Islands. Somehow, we need to get it there. I know the minister has provided refinancing for them, but I don't hear of any loans being given for the development of our people. Mr. Speaker, anything in life has risk, but we need to venture. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And the bank, Cayman Islands Development Bank, cannot, must not operate on the basis of one of the commercial banks. That is not their purpose. The objective, I see the Attorney General, the objective of a commercial bank, one of the 6 commercial banks we have, their objective is profit. That is not why we created Cayman Islands Development Bank. It is an integral part of nation building. And I am imploring the Minister for Finance and the Financial Secretary to rewrite its objective policies that will assist in developing this country through that, the mortgages, loans, or whatever, through there. At first, it was being done. We had some risky loans and mortgages that we paid out. We have questioned it extensively since then, and those seem to have been recovered to a greater extent or written off, whichever. Still got it? But we can't sit down, even though he says we still have them and still trying to recover. We cannot sit down and model our future off of our past experiences. Because if we continue to do that, the objective of that bank will never be achieved. There are Caymanians, young Caymanians, who have ideas too about starting up businesses. There are young Caymanians I know who are professionals, accountants, lawyers, name it, all the disciplines. Have degrees in business, MBAs, and they cannot get, or they won't apply to CIDB because they fear of being embarrassed. We need to take some risk on our own people. Give them the opportunity so that they can develop this country. I think it was Nike that was started with a grant and started in or Microsoft started in a garage or something like that. Microsoft. Look at, or Hewlett Packard, one of them. Look at what they have become. Mr. Speaker, every country brags of their 1% of super rich. We have not even reached that yet with our people. But how do they start? They start from small. The opportunities that the Premier talked about, that's what we need, opportunities. And I believe, and I've always believed, CIDB is that avenue. Always believed that. That's where it can start for our people. They are no less than those who come here and work and make their sacrifices and then go to the commercial bank and borrow and go in partnership with some Caymanian and have medium-sized business within a short period of time. Caymanians can do that too. Now, we may have to do what the Minister of Commerce say, hand-holding for a while. But now is a perfect time for us to reset that needle. But we're only providing the $9 million for those who have been in business for 2 years, it is? What about those who have never been in business and who can now start up or want to start up a new business? We need to move some of that red tape and give them some chances at this stage. And Mr. Speaker, there are many examples here of Caymanian businesses that started small and develop. Not only developed into medium-sized and large-sized businesses, but diversified and had other businesses along the way too. This is the time. Now is our time. I know we are cash-strapped and have to be even more frugal now than we have ever been. But now is the time to, if we can afford it, to assist those small businesses or those potential small businesses to get off the ground, to provide a service to the local economy. When we're not taking in anything in the local economy, like tourism, to support that side of it. Thank God for the financial services, because that continues to be robust. The things that are stopping some of these businesses, Mr. Speaker, which I should have said a while ago, is where we ask them, they can get the loans or the grants, but there is a requirement that CIDB not accepting applications from people who are not full-fledged accountants. Now, that may be a mistake on the part of the government to have put in that provision there to say that you have to be an accountant to access that assistance, that technical assistance program. Or it might not be, but they want qualified accountants. As I understand it, qualified accountants are only required for auditing, not for providing or the preparation of financial management. Qualified? Yeah, but when you're talking about a qualified accountant, CPA or whatever, those guys are working in the big firms. Well, most of them. So you want someone who is going to get $10,000 to go to one of them big companies. They don't have the time for that. So I thought it was about whether or not it was prepared properly and is verifiable. You see, those are the things that we overreach with. And there are people in this country who are not qualified accountants who are capable of preparing this documentation. So you're saying that if it's prepared by a qualified accountant, then you need not verify it. That's basically what we're saying. Yeah, Minister, I understand that, but what I'm saying is they prepare them, but there's no need for these little small loans to be able to do that if it's verifiable. And somebody has to do the due diligence. The institution is not going to just accept it from a qualified accountant and don't do their due diligence to verify it. But if you're not a qualified accountant, you can't submit it. Therein lies I believe the one of the areas that will discourage people. People in small business are more comfortable with dealing with their own people they know, as opposed to go and get some big accountant to do it for them. And you agree with that? It don't need to be an accountant firm. I understand, but where are you going to get qualified accountants that are not engaged or hired? I doubt it. And these are small businesses. And then, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the minister will make his response on and touch on that. But I know what? I implore you to reorganize, redirect, or put new policies in place for CIDB so we can achieve some objective of helping our own Caymanian people. And I'm not saying some are not being helped. I am saying more can be helped to start up their own little businesses. And that was the objective of CIDB when the now speaker was leader of government business and it was created. I recall that very specifically. And during the same time we became associate members of CARICOM. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the initiative, but I believe we need to expand it now and capture a few more things at this stage, that when the outside starts coming in and the economy starts rolling again, which I have no doubt will happen, we can have more Caymanians involved in small, successful businesses so that they can grow. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? I call the member for Georgetown Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I promise to be rather short and I was about to offer full support until the government started to laugh at the fact that I said I was going to be short. But if they want me to be another 2 hours, I'd be happy to do that. Mr. Speaker, the reality here is that this country is in some unprecedented times, and the government has been doing as much as it can in uncharted waters to try to get us through the storm. There will be political differences on many different policy issues, many areas of concern for our people. But I think it's fair to say that all members of this Honorable House definitely want to support this initiative because we know the intention and hopefully the inception of it will work appropriately to help the people of the Cayman Islands, particularly those in business, so we can get through this pandemic with the least amount of damage as possible to our business sector. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the government I give them the best wishes in their implementation of this. I know it comes from the good place to steer Cayman's business community and keep them afloat, just like any other jurisdiction. I would just add one caveat to make sure that we protect the taxpayers' money as much as we can, because this guarantee is not the 19 of us in this Honorable's House guarantee, but the taxpayers' money and the future children of this country that will have to potentially pay back any debt that may be incurred if this goes awry. but also to make sure that Caymanians are the true beneficiaries of the loan arrangements when approved. I think my colleagues have said enough about the way sometimes things go in the business community and who does what and who truly gets the benefit and all of those things, so I don't have to repeat. But I would hope that the Minister of Finance will keep a very keen, close eye on this process so that, for one, to get the money out there as soon as possible, because the business community truly does need it. But as quickly as we put it out there, we have to be just as protective with who gets it to make sure that those persons generally are in need of it. Because there are some people, some business community members who are hurting, but there are some who are profiting as well, meaning things are getting better for them as a result of the pandemic. So with only those short words, I give the Minister full support and the government full support in respect to this initiative, and try to see if you can get that money floating in the community as soon as possible, because the trickle-down effect, if done right, can have a great effect on the overall national economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Call now on the Honourable Minister for his right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and let me just say a very big thank you to all the members of the opposition who spoke in favour of the bill, indicating their support for the concept. Number of issues were raised. I'm going to try my best to make sure I try and cover as much as I can and deal with the issues and questions that were raised with regard to this in terms of my wind-up of this speech. Mr. Speaker, I preface my wind-up by just reminding members as well the whole purpose of this loan program, and that is to assist Caymanian businesses who are genuinely in need. And it doesn't matter to me, and it doesn't matter to this government, where it's 60% Caymanian owned or 100% Caymanian owned. If it's 60% Caymanian owned under the law, that is a Caymanian business. Anything less than 60% Caymanian owned is considered, needs a local company's control license. So I don't want to split hairs and make any distinctions between that. If you're 60, at least, and the statement says that one of the qualifying criteria is it has to be at least 60% Caymanian owned. But it really is to try and help people that are in need. These are working capital loans for the most part. And by the nature of what has happened with COVID-19, these businesses their doors have been shuttered, and they have been struggling to keep themselves going in repaying loans and keep taking care of what operating costs they have until the economy can reopen and they can reopen their businesses and get themselves running and operational again to recover. And they're going to need the help from the program like this, particularly in the coming months, because we have to remember that all the forbearances that the banks have given are by and large gone now. And they are now expecting their borrowers to make payments. And, the forbearance as well on the payment of pensions as well, that will come to an end. And they're going to have to start making these payments as well as all the other operational expenses. And so it's important, as we have stressed here tonight, that we get this done and get this program into operation so that people can begin to take advantage of what we are offering to them. Mr. Speaker, I think it was a member for Bodden Town West that raised the issue with regard to with regard to the additional authority that we're seeking to be given to me to allow for others to be added to the program. It is found in the resolution 2. Trying to find it. Yes. No, it says in Resolution B6, such other local financial institutions as considered suitable by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development. Member for Bodden Town West suggested, Mr. Speaker, that we add the words as regulated by SEMA. And I initially resisted it in my own mind, but had further discussions with him about it and what is really meant. And I do understand now that there are entities in Cayman that do operate in making loans to individuals and to businesses who are not regulated by SEMA. And at the end of the day, I think, I've decided I will accept that amendment to the motion. And so at the conclusion, I'm going to propose a further amendment to the government motion to add that clause, short clause, into those words into the motion. A question was raised as well to someone like the credit union. When we added this language, there were 3 entities I thought could possibly be added or seek to be included in a part of this. One was the building society, the other one was the credit union, and there is one other commercial bank that has not signed up. But the credit union, they have the ability to participate. In fact, we actually had discussion. They made inquiries, but somehow did not seem to follow through on it. But there's only those 3 institutions I could have ever thought so. But in order to give the comfort and to make sure that that's the case, we will add language that it has to be a SEMA-regulated entity. Question asked about why it was needed if the applicant... Oh, let me finish some other things first. Get my thoughts straight here. The member for Bodden Town West also asked questions about the monitoring of the loan program, and that will fall to the responsibility of the Ministry of Financial Services. And we will have resources dedicated to monitoring each of these loans, and they're in the agreement and the guarantee with the governments, with the financial institutions. They will have regular reporting obligations into the government with regard to loans when they are granted, first opportunities if there are indications that a loan might ultimately become default or get into a bad loan situation. They will have requirements to monitor and to report into government. And of course, occasions when they have to call upon the guarantee once they've exhausted their efforts. Question was asked by, I think, the member for Northside as to why is a guarantee needed if the applicant is in good standing with the bank. Most of them are at this present time, but the government and the banks do not want to be guaranteeing loans for entities that are already existing a great state of default or actually, insolvent. Because one of the things we want to make sure, and the banks will have to make sure, is that these businesses will continue to be viable before actually making these loans. These are high-risk loans that the banks will be making, and hence the need to provide the government guarantee, to provide that incentive, because in the current environment, businesses are going to continue to fail. So that, as with the other programs that we have done, particularly the small and micro businesses, one of the evaluations that have to take place is this business viable before you actually commit to making the loan. Why can't small businesses benefit from the scheme? Well, Minister for Commerce, Planning, Infrastructure spent a good time this evening explaining all the programs that we already have in place for small and micro businesses. We believe at this time that they are adequately covered under the Small Business Grant Program that is administered under the Ministry of Planning under the $9 million program that they have. Up to the end of September, approximately $5 million of the program had been utilized. And it is expected, Mr. Speaker, that in phase 2 of the program, the remaining $4 million will be used. And Mr. Speaker, if necessary, we can top up this program to help them. And the important thing that they have to remember is these are grants. They don't have to repay. And so we believe that they are being helped in a more direct and really beneficial way. The other aspect of it too is that the CIDB is also in the market making loans to small and micro businesses. They've made several $1 million in loans. Yes, CIDB can't grant a $1 million loan because they don't have the capitalization to do it, but they can certainly do a $100,000 loan. They can do a 50 or any amount within that sort of range, and they are making those loans, and they are available, and they're available on concessionary terms right now. So I think what this was designed to do is pick up where the small and micro business program leaves off. And we are addressing the medium and larger entities in Cayman with this program. And it's far different from the small business loan business program that we have, where there significant grants are being given to small and micro businesses. This is a loan program. They got to repay it, and they got to comply with the bank's rules and regulations. And then a question also raised, Mr. Speaker, as why is government considering waiving the 1 to 1.5% stamp duty, but the banks are not waiving their fees? I can't force the banks to waive their fees, Mr. Speaker, but as a government, we want to help our people as much as we can. And this is a cost that Caymanian borrowers are going to have to pay. It's something we can control, and government felt that it was another way in which we could assist these entities in this way. Will the approval of loans be done? Another question that was raised was, will the approval of loans be done locally in the Cayman Islands? Mr. Speaker, I think we all know that every one of the local clearing banks have their own lending practices. Certainly, I know for many of the banks that where there are very significant loans that they have to seek regional or head office approvals in order to make certain loans. But I'm also aware too that the local institution has certain limits of which they can go ahead and make loans. So we don't have any authority over the loan approval process of these banks. But the detailed agreement between the government and the banks, that this will be viewed and scrutinized by their head offices for approval. Hopefully, there would be no real delays in getting money into the hands of those who need it most urgently. Will the businesses provide security to government? We are not asking businesses to secure the borrowing or to secure the government guarantee. The banks themselves may ask for security, and they can ask for security over the exposure that they may have. And you understand, and what we have discussed and agreed with the banks is that in the event that the security that they have over their unsecured portion of their portion of the loan where they're at risk, is if they are called upon to liquidate or to call in their security, and there is excess over and above what exists on their secured portion, that the government could get that excess as well. A suggestion was made, Mr. Speaker, that applicants that are eligible to apply should only be those entities that experience difficulties because of COVID-19. Again, very difficult, I think, to prove. I think it's a reasonable conclusion. Every business in this country is now affected by COVID-19. And it'd be difficult to prove that, you know, and I think a probably unnecessary burden that they have to prove that they weren't in trouble prior to the March 22nd when we went into lockdown. But that's a part of the evaluation process that the bank itself is going to have to go through with them in judging, you know, what is the nature and true state of play in their customers. And we leave that to them. They are the experts at lending, not government. And so it's difficult to say that they have to prove that it's because of COVID-19. We all are in the same boat right now, regardless. And banks are going to have to make judgments and calls with regard to who is viable and who will really qualify to in order to meet these loans and access these loans. So I do appreciate all of the sentiments that were expressed. Well, compliance with the question was about compliance with the, if I remember correctly, with the Department of Labor and Pensions and work as well. Mr. Speaker, in relation to DLP, there is the real risk that many will not be in compliant, but they certainly will be able to access and use these funds to make themselves compliant with these things. But to make that an obstacle, to say you have to be compliant. And remember, they are borrowing these things for operational expenses, not just for you know. So I understand government is stepping up in a big way and guaranteeing it. Yeah. I mean, I'm really loath to pour you know, restrictions and requirements upon the banks and the borrowers. We have to give them the opportunity to get themselves back on their feet. So it's a Caymanian businesses we're protecting. So, Mr. Speaker, I do believe I have covered the majority of all of the major points that were raised. And so, I think, conclude my wind-up. I think, sir, you have a copy of the proposed amendment? Yes, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, I wind up by saying that in accordance with the relevant standing order, I wish to move an amendment to Government Motion Number 4, 2020-2021, Government Guaranteed Loan Scheme for Medium and Large-Sized Businesses. In the resolved section, item B6, to insert after the words financial institution, the words as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and close quotes. The last resolved section in B6 will now read as follows. Such other local financial institution as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and as considered suitable by the Minister of for Finance and Economic Development. So I move, Mr. Speaker, and I want to again thank members for their support and for the contributions that they have made to the debate and to the motion today. Thank you, sir.
Question is that Government Motion Number 4 be amended. Huh? That's what I'm reading. Question is that the Government Motion Number 4 be amended.
Yeah, be amended.
As follows.
Yes, yes.
And I only read this piece.
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go vote.
You gonna vote on this? Yeah. That's what I call on now. You know. Question is that the Government Motion Number 4 be amended as follows. The resolved section And B6 will now read such other local financial institutions as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and as considered suitable by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development. All in favor of this amendment, please say aye. Well, I guess I'm a little bit ahead of myself and asking for the vote before any person speaks. I took it that everybody was satisfied with all the talk that was going on. However, let me shift back and say, does any member wish to speak to this amended or proposed amendment? Does any member wish to speak to the proposed amendment? The member from Newlands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, just to register my disappointment that the government did not take my suggestion on board with regard to, in particular, those companies who are now breaking the immigration law and labor law by illegally making Caymanians redundant and keeping their work permits, yet they're going to still be allowed to benefit from this program. I want that registered. Thank you.
Honorable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there is a process, a legal process set out in the labor law to deal with matters where there is illegal activity in the labor market. Nothing that is being proposed here will prevent anyone who has a complaint about the way they are treated in the workforce from going through the usual process of registering that complaint. I think the point that the government is trying to make, which is not being acknowledged by some members on the other side, including the one that just spoke, is that whatever you do in trying to address these issues, the cure must not be worse than the disease. All of the businesses that we are seeking to help are Caymanian, majority Caymanian owned. There are Caymanians who own the majority of these businesses. The more hurdles that we put in place in making it difficult for them to access money, which is to be utilized principally for operational purposes, the harder we make it for those businesses to survive and employ anyone. That is the point that we are trying to make. We are not suggesting, Mr. Speaker, that the member from Newlands is wrong in that some businesses would not do what many of them have been doing over many, many years, seeking to prefer work permit holders over Caymanians in some instances. We're not suggesting that's not so. But we're saying the cure cannot be worse than the disease. If many of these alleged breaches, I am sure, are to do with the struggles that businesses are having in just keeping their doors open and meeting payroll. Now, if we keep them from meeting payroll because we make it that much more difficult for them to access these loans, we are almost certainly ensuring that those businesses are going to close. And then there will be no one working in the businesses, Caymanian or otherwise, and the Caymanian owners of the businesses will be without an income. So the responses that we have to make to these sorts of challenges needs to be proportionate, and to understand that the crisis in which we find ourselves now is likely to continue for an extended period of time. And if we have significant numbers of businesses, the member from Unit himself spoke about 47 or 48 small businesses that were struggling and might close down in 6 months. If we have significant bankruptcies and closures of businesses in this economy, the knock-on effect of that is going to be felt right throughout the economy. And it is then that we are going to truly find ourselves in a massive national crisis. So there is no perfection in these things, but the government, I promise the member, has thought through the implications of those sorts of matters before we arrived where we are today in respect of this matter. So we are not dismissing his concerns. We are saying his proposal to address them is over the top and is likely to be worse than the issue, that the result is likely to be worse and more damaging to the overall economy and the prospects of Caymanians generally to have jobs and have income than the cure that he is seeking to effect by adding on this additional condition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A member from Bordentown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll also be brief, but since I was the person who would propose the amendment, and I want to thank the Honorable Minister for accepting the amendment, I just want to put, I guess, a little bit of clarity as to why we suggested it, and also why this road is being taken for the listening public. I don't want to get overly technical, but one of the things why I suggested institution regulated by SEMA is that those institutions, as regulated by SEMA, are required to have a robust credit risk process in place. So at a minimum, there will be no cowboy loans or nothing kamikaze or anything like that, because at the end of the day, it is the public money, and we would want at the end of the day that there's some prudence or some due diligence or some careful taking as just not to give away money and then people showing up and saying to the government, well, we need this money because you guarantee it. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted entities regulated by SEMA. I think also, Mr. Speaker, which I didn't touch on earlier, but one of the things that people also need to recognize is that here's what has happened to our economy during the crisis. For the last 6-7 months, a lot of the emphasis have been on the employees, and we have not done enough for the employers, if the truth be told. And one of the things, if you go back and you look at what it was that created the financial crisis, was when you start getting into the lending where it was easier for employees to access money. We also need to recognize that for employees to repay the money that they access, they need to have jobs, and that's why employers are needed. One of the perfect examples of that, Mr. Speaker, is actually the 2008 financial crisis. And one of the rules that they had changed moving from Basel I to Basel II is that in yesteryears gone by, banks needed to set aside 50 cents of their capital for every dollar that they would have normally spent within their ratios, and basically 100% or $1 of their capital for each money that they lent to corporate companies. On the Basel II, they had dropped that down to 35%. It's a little ratio that they use. So in essence, you could have lent to the employees 3 times before you could have lent to the employer. And what they did was went out and lent a lot of money to the employees. But then the employers got shafted in the process. And those very employees that you needed to repay the loans that they got basically had no jobs because the employers, there were no incentive to lend to employers. As it stands right now, even with these loans, the bank still has to set aside 100% of capital for corporate loans or business loans. With a government guarantee, this actually allows the bank, because the Cayman Islands government stand in, and if I go back to banking memory, the risk weighted on loans for the Cayman Islands government is actually 0. So the banks at least have some flexibility that even if they're lending out $200 million, they don't have to take $200 million hit on their capital. They can only take 50% realistically if they want it, because the government, who has a 0% risk rating, actually would offset the loan. So it would actually help the bank's capital position. Banks have never been too keen to lend to businesses because of the duration of business loan can't be as long as a consumer loan, and then also the risk rated to the capital. So this actually helps the bank and also will help the economy in terms of managing their capital requirements as required by SEMA as a regulated entity, but also at the same time see what it is that we can do to help employers in terms of keeping employees on. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, slice it and dice it any way you want, the greatest friend to an employee is still an employer. You still need to have a job to pay your bills. It's just that simple. So I do recognize that there are challenges, and it is very difficult sometimes where you try to get one set of legislation that will fix a lot of different problems. But when you start getting into different ratios and different kind of things and getting into the banking business, it's a whole different ball game altogether. So I do understand the concerns, but I just think at the same time we need to basically put everything back in context that the employees now still need to have a job, and we need to do something. The US, the UK, and all of them have the ability to print money. We don't. So we can't get as creative as they do. But we need to see what it is that we can do. But this needs to be done one way or the other. So I just wanted to add that there, just to kind of bring it back to the focus as to why we're here. But at the same time, do recognize that these are challenging times for everyone, both employee and employer. But we need to make sure at the end of the day that the people still have a job and that the employers can access money and at least pay the employees. Thank you.
If no other member wishes to speak, I don't know if the minister needs an opportunity to reply to any of this.
Mr. Speaker, just really to thank the Honourable Premier and the member for Baden Town West for their interventions and for information provided, again, indicating their support as well. I think right now we're at the moment of the amendment to the motion.
Question is that the government motion number 4 be amended as follows. The last resolved section in B6 will now read, such other local financial institutions as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and as considered suitable by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Does any member wish now to speak to the entire motion as amended? If not, the question is that be therefore resolved that a government guarantee for the government guaranteed loan scheme for medium and large-sized businesses be approved as follows. A blanket guarantee for 7 years of 50% of the maximum loan scheme limit of $200 million, which is equivalent to the Cayman Islands dollars 100 million. B, the government to guarantee 50% of the loans, which are not to exceed a total of 200 million Cayman Islands dollars to the following local financial institutions. 1, Butterfield Bank Cayman Limited. 2, Cayman National Bank Limited. 3, First Caribbean International Bank Cayman Limited. 4, RBC Royal Bank Cayman Limited. 5, Scotia Bank and Trust Cayman Limited. 6, such other local financial institution as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and as considered suitable by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Government motion number 4 is carried. Honorable Premier. You know that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, just out of an abundance of caution, when you were reading the resolution, the question, you omitted, after you read out the financial institutions, you omitted to read C, that the guarantee shall be signed by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development on behalf of the government of the Cayman Islands.
That is correct.
Just drawing it to your attention, sir.
I got to go read the entire thing since that last bit. Be therefore resolved that a government guarantee for the government guaranteed loan scheme for medium and large-sized businesses be approved as follows. A blanket guarantee for 7 years of 50% of the maximum loan scheme limit of Cayman Islands $200 million, which is equivalent to Cayman Islands $100 million. B, the government to guarantee 50% of the loans which are not to exceed a total of 200 million Cayman Islands dollars to the following local financial institutions. 1, Butterfield Bank Cayman Limited. 2, Cayman National Bank Limited. 3, First Caribbean International Bank Cayman Limited. 4, RBC Royal Bank Cayman Limited. 5, Scotiabank and Trust Cayman Limited. And 6, such other local financial institution as regulated by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority and as considered suitable by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development. And C, that the guarantees shall be signed by the Minister for Finance and Economic Development on behalf of the government of the Cayman Islands. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Government motion number 4 is carried. Honorable Premier. Honorable Minister of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just beg your indulgence. I just want to respond to the member from Bordentown West on the question earlier. He asked whether there were 1,540 applications for the grants program for the
And you
small,
are answering that aspect
yes, sir.
of the parliamentary question you're talking?
Yes.
The
Mr.
question,
Speaker.
okay.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. So the answer to that is that there was 1,447 small and micro businesses that were approved and the grants were awarded.
This is the third time I've called on you, I think. I think they must be sure by now. No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow is Private Members' Day, and so the government's business will be interrupted, and we will deal with private members' motions, questions, and private members' motions tomorrow. And as I indicated to the Business Committee, we will continue each day until 7 o'clock in an attempt to get through a reasonable amount of business in the course of the day without having to go into the wee hours on any particular day. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of this Honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Question is that the House do stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, the 15th of October. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable House do stand adjourned until tomorrow.